Come on and shine, shine, shine. Las Vegas, shine your light on me.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight. Join award-winning host Dale Davidson as he interviews the most remarkable people you'll find in the entertainment capital of the world. You'll meet entertainers, sports figures, newsmakers, community and business leaders, and people just like you with stories that'll touch your heart. Now, here's Dale Davidson.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. Each and every episode, we bring you fascinating guests. Boy, we've done it for you this time. Bob Andersen, who is a dear friend, a pioneer in broadcasting, a legend. I hesitate to say all of that because it makes you sound old, Bob, but we're the same age, so here we go. Thanks for coming.
Hey, wonderful to be
here,
Dale.
Thank you, Bob.
And it's sort of like old times and emphasizing the old there, for sure.
It was, more than 30 years ago that we worked together.
And probably more than 30 pounds ago. Yes, somewhere in there. It's a weighty subject when we get into it, that's for sure. Okay.
So you're going to, as you can tell, you're going to enjoy Bob. You're going to enjoy Bob. Let's talk a little bit about...
It's a farmer in the Dale. That's
Tons.
Okay.
And both of us are coughing. It's NAB week here in Las Vegas, and we're all tired and sickly. But National Association of Broadcasters have their meeting every year here. Yeah. Most years you come, right?
Yes, I've been coming since 1969.
That's all.
Yeah. I came in as an infant, I'm sure. and so anyway, it's been part of the adventure of learning.
Oh yeah.
And I think the reason I have to come back is I ain't smart enough yet. It takes a while to really get
He's a modest man. He's a modest man.
But it's changing so radically.
Yeah.
What is changing, though, we can talk about technology, but that really isn't what some changes. It's the opportunity.
Oh, sure.
The opportunity's changing.
Oh, yeah.
And
we have the opportunity to reach people, to interact with people through social media, and it's just fantastic. All for Christ, because you've been doing that work for years and years.
The bottom line, it's all for Christ, because that's only what's done for Christ will last.
That's true. That's
true.
Yeah.
I pause sometimes and say, who was even in the last Super Bowl? And those are major events in the media business.
Oh yeah, sure.
And we do a lot of work.
Yeah.
And it's something about the things of the highest pinnacle.
Right.
Seem to fade away. It could be Alzheimer's for me. I don't know, but a lot of things change.
Yeah,
however, it seems like events that have been eternal, they mark life to change. And not only is it something that can happen in that moment, but it blossoms, and it's only a beginning for forever. And that's kind of pretty exciting in that those events, some of them have been related to media, and things have actually become the marathon into eternity.
That's wonderful.
And it's pretty exciting, because God is at work.
Sure.
Despite how lazy I am, or whatever it might be, and it's pretty interesting when you start looking at it that way.
Yeah.
And so sometimes I get sidelined, and but I think of at the end of the trail, wherever it is, and we get out. I think as we see that quarterback leave the Super Bowl, I do remember the phrase. Hey, where are you going? I don't remember who they're talking to necessarily every time, but I remember they say, I'm going to Disney World,
Yeah, that's right.
And I think what is pretty exciting about when it's done with an eternal thing is wherever we step off the field, I'm going to paradise.
Yeah, that's right.
It's pretty exciting.
It is very exciting.
And it's like I think that's going to be probably better than the Mickey Mouse deal. You know? Yeah. So it could be pretty thrilling.
We talked about your pioneer work in Christian broadcasting, and you really were a kid when you went to work for Rex Humbard, who truly was a broadcast pioneer in buying network time and bringing on major talent and that sort of thing at the Cathedral of Tomorrow in Akron, Ohio. Tell us how you got into that business. And any stories you want to tell about Reverend Rex Humbard?
Well, even before that, first of all, I grew up without television, so actually, God sort of directed me into television was sort of like, might as well have been an astronaut, because it was a not familiar territory in that sense. But going through college, I needed a job, and so I ended up working in as a technician in the television department, and that meant you carried everything for the guys that knew what was going on. and I had a sort of a vast learning curve there to learn which end of the soldering iron was hot. And so my technical skills developed there,
Yes, that's how you learn.
And so what I ended up doing is, though eventually I ended up saying, I kind of like this, you can deal with pictures.
Sure.
And I was kind of a Crayola kind of guy in college, I ended up enjoying the idea of actually trying to share stories with the imagination a little bit and pictures. And so the fact of not necessarily having television is actually possibly encouraged my imagination too.
Sure.
Yeah, and then desperately needing funds to get through college encouraged me to get a job, drag cable through buildings, take tape machines and cameras to all the collegiate events, record anything and everything, and a bunch of teachers who were near death wanted to have their educational format continue on for years beyond, recording and logging all this stuff in. So I basically had a little bit of the hands-on in college, decided to, as I looked through the book, I had struggled about trying to figure out what direction I would go with my life.
Yes.
I came from a very loving, dear Christian family.
Yes.
Didn't have a TV.
Yes.
And also didn't have an indoor bathroom, and things like that. But I thought
I want to talk about that story. How Bob helped bring me to Christ. A terrific story about growing up in the Ozarks, really?
It was in Missouri, but we were a little north there.
Yeah.
We didn't have them hills there. But we didn't have bathrooms inside either, but it was pretty fun. But we didn't know any better. And actually, we were quite blessed because we were really rich with love. And my parents had very dear parents. Then I had 4 brothers.
Right.
And 3 of them are very dear. No, actually they're all great. And what was my challenge was they had done so well academically, skill sets, scholarship and stuff.
Right.
And I don't know how to answer those questions and get all those scholarships like they did. And some of them had a lot of talent there. But so I was I admired my older and one younger brother, although my family has talked about that I had a younger brother of the 5 of us, but they considered me the baby of the family. So I don't know how that really happened. But they were always, we always had a great time. And so 5 boys in a family, all 5 of us boys had a great time, and Mom suffered.
There's a lot of that.
However, she had this philosophy that if something was going on, everybody must have been involved. And I remember my brother David and my little brother Ronnie would get in a scuffle, and my mom would come in and wake me up to give me a spanking. And now that was pretty discouraging. But I went to college, though.
Say Bobby had something to do with this.
Yeah. And I'd be sleeping. At any rate, that's not the way my brothers tell it either.
Yeah.
But I had a great time. But I was challenged when I went off to say, okay, what do I do with my life?
Yes.
My dad and my mom were such godly people, would give everything they had when they had nearly nothing to someone in need.
Right.
because they always saw someone else in much greater need.
That's
And it was a share everything kind of atmosphere. I had older brothers that had gone on with great careers, and my brothers very distinguished in all of their areas of efforts.
Right.
Very old now too, but anyway, but we ended up seeing. I wondered, now what do I do? I had one older brother who had gone into ministry and evangelism, had a big area, region-wide crusades and things, and I'd go out sometimes and work with them there, and I led music in some of those things. And, so, when you're doing stuff like that, you don't have to read, whatever. Anyway, so, and I always felt like, though, I really felt there's a need to share the Lord, in a career. But, when I went to college, I couldn't figure out what career box to check.
Right.
And I go through so many things, and I remember at the University of Missouri, and I went over to their career counseling center, and I did experience this idea of, okay, let's get you on track, Bob.
Right.
And so they gave me, I think I went through 5 series of testing, and then I met at the end of that series, and I was quite discouraged because, going to college, spending money that you hardly don't have,
right.
And I was giving haircuts to the ROTC guys that had to have a close trim every week for a quarter for my laundry money.
Wow.
And talk about a close shave. Those guys, it's at least when it's thin, you don't see how much butchering is there. But anyway, I kept my clothes clean that way. And when I went to that counseling session, they said, Bob, there were 3 very qualified psychologists there. And maybe there was something else too. I don't know what they might have been veterinarians. But they told me that they had actually reviewed all of my testings, and that I was best aligned with morticians. And I don't know. I think I dug myself a hole.
Yeah. Bada bing, bada bang. We're going to have to take a brief break because he has some more puns he needs to think of before we come back. We'll take a brief break for some messages, and we'll be back with Bob Andersen.
Potential audience of more than 50 million people is reached every week by Las Vegas Tonight. To keep the important message of Christ's love on the air, we need your prayers and financial blessings. Please send your tax-deductible gift to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. For a donation of $25 or more, we'll send you a copy of Dale Davidson's new book, Las Vegas Tonight, From Sin City to Vegas Saints. You'll love these inspiring stories of Las Vegas Christians who are changing the world. Or donate to the ministry, or order Dale's book by going to vegassaints.org. That's vegassaints.org. Or call us today at 702-480-3989. That's 480-3989. God bless you.
We're back, and we're having such a wonderful time with my friend, my dear pal, Bob Andersen, who has been in Christian television for how many years, Bob?
Since '69, I got into the television side, and Christian television. I started actually in probably 70, 71.
Yeah.
So.
Tell us a little bit about Rex Humbard and some of the pioneering things that pastor and evangelist did on local and network television.
Well, at that time, we didn't think it was pioneering. We thought it was futuristic.
Yeah.
Come on now.
That's right.
I don't have a coonskin cap, but that would possibly be fitting.
Yeah.
However, one of the things is out of college, I was privileged to have an internship, and the internship allowed me to go to a production facility that was part of a station operation. And it was very difficult to find the experience of
of
major production.
Right. Yeah.
So the privilege of there were two out of our media group that year were able to get or get the internship.
Right.
You know, and what a privilege it is to pay for it, and to also then work the 16-hour days.
Right.
And then they gave you everything that happened before 6 in the at 6 in the morning to come in and direct.
Right.
You know, because I got very experienced at doing the farm report, but I got to sit in director's seat and I got to do the job, and it was something nobody else wanted to do, and I was so enthusiastic to do that. But my wife and I also, I had just gotten my degree. My wife had also gotten her degree. This is quite a, you know, a target for us.
Sure.
So we went to Kansas City for this internship at the major, what was Channel 5, KCMO, CBS affiliate station
Right,
there
I know
with the
that
production
station, yeah.
facility and all, and a wonderful production manager gave us a lot of good guidance. And I wanted to, since we actually graduated not only with college debt, but zero cash. You know,
Yeah, that's right.
And we were
those
we were
days.
excited.
Yeah.
But so I went there, and just 2 blocks from the station was brand new low-income housing. I was excited.
Yeah.
So I thought, this is really wonderful. If somebody needs low-income housing,
It was you
hey,
guys.
I thought that we went there to find what was the lowest entry efficiency, because I could walk to work,
right.
and we had challenges on the transportation side, you know. My wife's driving skill. No, it was actually the vehicle. It was the vehicle. Sorry, Joy. But what we ended up doing, though, is we applied, and we were rejected.
Oh, no.
We didn't make enough money for low-income housing. The first week out of college, as graduates, we went into our career being rejected from low-income housing.
Because you didn't make enough money.
Because we did not make enough money. So we found even a cheaper dive to excitingly live in and have a wonderful experience. But through that experience, then a year and a half later, or just about a year later or so, maybe, the station, I had just stayed in touch, and I had a public relations degree as well as a radio, television, and communications degree, radio, television, and film. And I was trying to cover as many bases as I could. And actually, I went through the catalog, and I found the quickest way out.
Yeah.
And then I found that I could also double major at the same time, and so I took advantage of that. But it was a pretty exciting opportunity. And when I ended up with that, I ended up doing public relations for a year. My wife was was teaching. We went back there by the station and said, you know, I'd like to get really into the TV side of it. I like pictures, you know. So you know, so you know, and even when I read a book, it's like I like the picture books, you know. They're some of my favorites, and I get the most out of that, I think. So I can get through it faster. And what it ends up doing, though, there was this group doing a new program in that same studio, but it was being syndicated. They were flying in a producer-director team out of Akron, Ohio. An agency from Ohio was handling that, but it was for Youth for Christ. It was a Christian broadcast, in the first television broadcasting there for Youth for Christ, and it was from that circle of people that had started back in those earlier days than me, you know, with people like
Billy Graham was one,
and Cliff Barrows, and the man there was Al Metzger with Kansas City Youth for Christ.
Right.
And my family had known Al because my brother, that was an evangelist, had spoken there many times, and we'd been there. And even in high school, I'd been part of the music quartet there, and I sang there, you know, and I probably should have been doing karaoke, you know, but they were letting me sing, and so I knew them, and the station management there recommended me.
Wow.
And I had a long time to pay them off. No, but when I ended up doing that, they ended up. I started doing the weekly television producing and directing with Youth for Christ. Got quite involved, and this was really a great thing going forward.
Yeah.
But about a year down later, too, though, I was had looked at some other options growing as well, and so an ad agency that was doing syndication had invited me to come, and my wife and I went to a place I'd never heard of, Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio.
Just north of Akron.
Well, and so, and with a name like that, I started referring to it as the Falls, and anyway, I had never seen it, heard of this place, but we made this trip, and I was hired to also produce a number of, there was about 6 shows in progress with this agency, and so I went there as a producer, director, and a production manager for the ad agency. Did a lot of really wonderful things with publishing groups and audio and video recording and producing, and met a lot of wonderful Christian television people. Larry Poland, Dr. Larry Poland, who went later with Master Media, and so he was a college president, did the show Turning Point before other Turning Points turned up. As well, and Nikki Cruz and Art Linkletter's programming, and Fleming H. Revell Publishing and the Christian comic series, doing the audio reading of Helen Steiner Rice's poetry, but I started working with the production facility across the street, and it was this Cathedral teleproductions facility, and there was Rex Humbert, but I had met
the Cathedral of Tomorrow.
But I had met Rex and his team at part of Youth for Christ, as well as because I was also helping and I was doing the producing and activity talents with Youth for Christ's weekly projects. But in the end, about a year later, though, I was asked to fill in for 30 days during when they had to transition of a director. And so I took a 30-day fill-in with Rex Humbert and Youth at the Cathedral of Tomorrow, and 10 years later, I got my evaluation, and so, but that 10 years became quite exciting, and there was a lot of frontier movement. And Rex sat down and said, Bob, the family is deteriorating in our country. I want to emphasize the family. I would like to take an English program, and what this whole ministry that he had dedicated, even when this building was founded, every pillar was representing a state of the United States. The dome was representing the reach the world, and his goal and passion was to reach the world. We need to do that. Right. And so over the next 18 months, it was my task to try to take it to the world. I don't know how far we really got, but in 18 months, we were broadcasting in 91 languages.
Wow.
And this was at a time,
awesome.
The technology and the efforts. When I went to Hollywood, they said, we can't do a 1-hour Foley loop translation. It would be about a 6-month process. And I said, guys, I have to do this every week.
Right.
And so I wasn't about to say, this can't be done. I got to figure this out, how we're going to do it. So we ended up going back through and looking at what could we do. We had the 2-inch wide videotape, but we also were recording 2-inch wide audio tape with multi-track, because Rex and his team were fantastic with music and activity there, and a lot of music.
The cathedrals or the quartet.
And a lot of people migrated out of that into groups like the Imperials and then many other groups too that were related back to Rex Humbert. And Rex and his family went back through the music history of a lot of gospel. But I started using that as the foundation stone to deliver multiple languages. And we were able to then, within a short time, record in multiple languages, and many places became opportunities. But now these are nationally owned stations outside the United States. Most of everything is commercial here, but there it's nationally controlled.
The government.
Yeah. But so now this is a Christian programming going to a lot of not necessarily Christian sort of focused nations.
Yeah.
So that was another part of the, I think, godly, Holy Spirit directed entity. But you know, I'm a kid and I didn't know anything about anything that was that would be a block. What we had to do is get her done.
Yeah.
And so that's what we went about doing.
Yeah.
And so there's quite a bit of story about, okay, how did we dig through the loss or the lack of technology? Now we're talking in the 70s.
Oh,
and
yeah.
when I go to Japan, they didn't have much television facilities to offer.
Sure, I'll bet that's right.
And
yeah.
the world was depending on manufacturing by people like RCA.
I understand. Yeah.
Yeah, and RCA went the way of TWA. They don't exist,
Yeah,
you know,
I know they
today.
don't. Yeah,
but
yeah,
they were the main supplier, and
Yeah.
Rex had become, because of his broadcast enthusiasm, I was working there due to Rex's long-term effort with them, usually with their beta equipment
I
of the
know.
newest technology.
Yeah.
And so when I would go to a foreign country, I usually had either a serial number between 1 and 5
On the brand new stuff.
brand new stuff.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of good things
There
out of
you
that.
go. We're going to take another brief
All
break,
right.
and we'll be back with Bob Andersen right after these messages. Hello, I'm Dale Davidson. I hope you're enjoying Las Vegas tonight. The guests we've had on the program are wonderful examples of Christians who take seriously Christ's command to love one another. In addition to the hundreds of television stations across the United States now carrying our show, we have been presented with the outstanding opportunity to bring these inspiring stories to people around the world. An international satellite network in the Russian and Ukrainian languages has asked us to provide them with episodes to be broadcast to millions. To make a gift to support this very special effort, please send your check or money order to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. To use your credit or debit card, call 702-480-3989. Thank you, and God bless you. Welcome back to Las Vegas tonight, and our very special guest, Bob Andersen. So, Bob, we were talking about Rex Humbard and your years with the Reverend Rex. Tell us about the massive crusades, because he's a contemporary of Billy Graham who was doing it all over the world. And you folks were filling stadiums, particularly all over the world.
Well,
but tell us about Brazil and other places like
God
that.
was doing the filling of the stadiums. I think it's. I was just sort of trying to diligently work and sort of follow the passion of a worldwide heart to share Christ.
Right.
And Rex, it was a great opportunity to sort of be there at a time when God was sort of making it possible. But it wasn't easy, because most of it wasn't, you couldn't go to Hollywood and find this, here's a footprint to follow or template to follow.
Yeah.
And so
you were making it up as you went.
Well, I was trying to figure out a way to get it done, and Rex was knowing that God was going to accomplish it, even if he had some really hillbilly Bobby, and so what was interesting about it is I just didn't. I'd grown up that no wasn't a possibility. It just you just had to figure it out.
Yeah.
And so I was blessed with a lot of great technical assistance of people, and people who also were excited about sharing the gospel around us. And then there were some guys that didn't know the gospel, but they were good technicians, and that was part of a mission field too.
That's right. You're working with them.
But well, they were working, and I was with them. and so we ended up though finding, like for example, was it worth it to do all this lip synchronized translation? Because in Hollywood, they would just look at a large screen, put on headsets, they'd change the video to a kinescope film, and they would read
try to match it.
Yeah, and just try to communicate, and so I had done that, and I saw Rex not speaking and him talking in the audio and his mouth not moving, and I said, this is probably a distraction to share the gospel like that. I mean, they can make some movies like that and maybe get away with it,
Right.
but I'm not responsible for the movie. I'm responsible for this and sharing the gospel in a more effective way. Right. And I think, from my standpoint, is I was to remove distractions. Rex was carrying the message.
Yes.
My job was this: how to remove the distractions. So we went to great pains of lip synchronizing. And at the time, that wasn't done. And then later years, actually, networks of many other countries contacted our offices and myself and some of the other technicians there. And we built studios in many other parts of the world because people just didn't understand what it was. And it's actually common sense. First of all, we were able to do time code, which is actually a little clock. You know, you can record on at that time videotape, and of course today people don't remember even videotape in our business. But it was a place to put this sort of timing device, and I found it pretty interesting that I could actually select 1/30th of a second.
Yeah, one frame.
Because, and that'd be a frame and be right there. Now we can even do it 1,000th of a second, other things. But 1/30th is good enough to get it close, you know. And so I said, we want to start when they open their mouth, and we want to end with this translation when they close their mouth. But people said, now a translation is sometimes this long for this much English.
Right.
Yeah, and this long for this much English didn't fit. Even if I started at the same place.
Right.
Ending at the same place was another challenge. So I said, well, let's do it a different way, or add to that. And so we actually, since I had a few people that understood our English better, I had them take the transcript and slice it into syllables.
Wow.
And actually, we began to request that our translation fit a syllable count.
Really?
As well as a content and message. And here's what happened. It was able for us to make a content in all of these languages that became, first of all, we respected the culture, the people, and took away a distraction that they were always getting thrown in all the media, and we spoke to them in their understandable language without the distraction of almost being some unrelated puppetry.
I understand.
And that was big. And I think that became the next thing, relevant.
Right.
And it allowed it to become relational. And people then become responding. And they were responding to the Word of God to say, not a distraction that just sort of saying, I didn't want them to be laughing at the altar call.
Yes.
I want them to build a relationship that they responded to the call of grace through Christ. And so our effort was to make that relationable, and as a result of that, we could go into these countries and people had accepted them as one of their family, and they had responded. We became one big prayer key family, praying for each other. And they knew that Rex was remembering them, responding to them. And you know, the whole family would come out. And we went to Brazil, and Rex, he actually was in Arkansas. That's more country than Missouri. He's a good old boy.
Yeah, he was a tent evangelist.
He had been a tent evangelist, and he had a heart for the Lord.
Yes, he did.
And he wanted everybody to hear
Wonderful
it
family.
and know that.
Yeah.
And so we go there, and the family would show up. And, you know, we went to, if people remember the Olympics in Rio of more recent times.
Oh, sure.
That stadium, which is the Maracanã Stadium, the largest down in Brazil, we went to Rio de Janeiro, and the whole family filled the place and more.
Oh.
And to see probably about 180,000 or more people, and probably people had suggested that it was over 80%, stood and prayed the sinner's prayer to accept Jesus Christ as their personal Lord and Savior.
That's amazing.
Because it was some of the family came to show up and share the gospel. Then we went to other, and over a few weeks period, we actually in stadiums and then other events met over 1 million of our family in Brazil. Then we did it over across Australia. We had people show up way before the time at the Sydney Opera House, and so we had to start a couple hours earlier than scheduled, but we ended up, had a service and then invited the next group, and we had 3 consecutive services at the Sydney Opera House. And we just kind of wore out, and we then went out on the steps and talked to the rest of them, you know.
Yeah.
But to do that, technology, we had to move it around the globe. We had 80,000 pounds of equipment, about 45 people, and we'd go to places. And went to Adelaide, Australia, and they said, "Hey, Bob, you may not have to bring your equipment. We do television here every week, you know." And so I went there, and they did television every week.
Yeah.
They had 1 camera in the center on the top, and they would follow basketball in black and white, back and forth, back and forth. They were doing television, and this was okay.
Yeah.
I said, well, I complimented them and said, but I'm responsible for Rex, and more than that, I have to remove distractions and bring the gospel face to face, eye to eye, heart to heart.
Yes.
And so we brought in 80,000 pounds of equipment. I had to go through. They actually we'd done it by land, air, and sea to get there, and we had to break open the things and because it had been through a couple of sea storms, and we didn't even know if it was all going to be there or working.
Wow,
and they broke open the containers, and when they popped the containers, I had a guy showing up there, you know, from the immigrations and. Or whatever they had to, you know, go through everything.
The customs people.
Customs,
yeah.
you know, and they confiscated several things. They confiscated the sandbags to hold some of the lighting stands in place, and then they cut them open, and then they realized, well, it's really silicone, it wasn't sand, and it didn't have the boar worms or whatever in it. So I taped them back together, you know, and then they decided, you know, you can't bring in lumber there too because it might have some kind of something that would you know, mess up the tree somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that was my camera platforms, and I'm talking the morning of our opening production to go all across Australia, and then they realized this had been processed lumber. I didn't bring a tree, you know, and so, but even with those delays, we got on, and then it went from there to around the world. And what was interesting, Rex would also stand in front of hundreds of thousands and share it to one on a heart. But he had me stop the van and step out and would pray with people. We'd be down on the street across Africa or India or wherever it might be. And if he saw someone hurting, the Lord compelled him to stop and pray with them and to help lift them up. And, you know, I saw him at more than one of those wells of Samaria,
Yes.
so to speak.
Yes.
And he didn't go there to share anything about condemning. It was to share a grace. And his desire, as it's shared in the Word, it's God's desire, and put it in hearts that none should perish, but have everlasting life. And so how do we move from all of this congestion, moving things around? And there was the complications, and there was just moving in people and 80,000 pounds of equipment and things around and getting through the customs, going on to national stations. And we had someone like President Pinochet of Chile, who controlled all their stations, said, he called on Rex to come, and he said, our nation is seeing the degradation of the family.
Yeah.
We need what you're sharing and representing. And he invited us to go on the station, and that program we had done in Spanish,
Right.
it ended up migrating into like 28 nations off one translation. And it made, boy, the value of a translation become dynamic. And in Chile, the president said, I want this on to help our families be nurtured. And so in one day, one tape was on 87 stations across the entire national network of Chile. And later, he said, I want you to come. And we were in Brazil and had no plans to be there. And he said, I want you to come. And he sent a fleet of his Air Chile jets to come over, pick up all our equipment, all our crew, and open the stadium in Sao Paulo, Brazil. Or I shouldn't say Sao Paulo. How about Santiago, Chile? Yeah. He didn't have that much influence, you know, but he was pretty influential there. But in Santiago, Chile, filling the stadium and beyond. I mean, there was crowds so much that our buses could hardly get to the stadium. And the stadium's filled, and we get there with a whole troop of the military and Secret Service taking us in, and then preaching and seeing God at work, and just literally tens of thousands accepting Christ, and those who were Christians standing and praising the Lord together. And so there's truly a global family that was brought together through one little kid from Arkansas that grew up with a fire in his heart, and then this. They allowed some other little guy like me just to help do a job. And so was I able to help share the gospel? I believe that maybe just being a mortician wasn't the calling. Because how about let's actually
Eternal life.
Let's talk about more the resurrection than the burial.
There you go.
All right.
There you go. We're going to take another brief break and come back for our last segment with Bob Andersen.
Drawn by the lights, glamour, and opportunities in Sin City, they come from all over the world, searching for their chance to be a pretty woman, a success, or maybe just to have a better life. Be somebody. What happened after they got here is literally changing the world. From the story of Tommy Scott, a former gang enforcer turned Christian evangelist, to the Hookers for Jesus Outreach Ministry, to the heart-wrenching story of Arturo Martinez and his heroic act of forgiving the man who assaulted and murdered his wife and 10-year-old daughter. Las Vegas Tonight presents an extraordinary depiction of Las Vegas as a city of transformation, from Sin City to Vegas Saints. Las Vegas Tonight, from Sin City to Vegas Saints, a collection of true stories of transformation, people whose lives were transformed, and people who are now transforming the world.
We are back and honored to be with my friend, broadcast pioneer, Bob Andersen.
Thank you, Dale.
Let's talk about you and me a little bit.
Yeah, we go back ways.
We do. And I remember right about, 1980 maybe, 81, 82. You were hiring me. I hadn't come to Christ. And God bless you, you gave me work anyway. And I was doing some writing. I remember writing for the Republican National Committee.
Right.
And for Every Home for Christ International and some of your other projects.
Yes.
And I was honored to do so. And you cast me, this was funny, you cast me in the leading role in a network commercial.
Yes.
And we got on an airplane together and flew to Phoenix, Arizona.
I remember that.
And we ended up close to Yuma. And the scene was out in the desert and so on. And we had an opportunity to talk. And I'll never forget the moment when I said, Bob, explain this Jesus thing to me. What's this all about? And we had a wonderful conversation. Tell us a little bit about what transpired.
Well, going out there to shoot a national commercial, and I had a lot of concerns. One is the talent I'd cast.
Who can blame you?
But no, we felt it was the right person to have that sort of, at that time, youthful look. I know that's hard to believe, but that trim fit look, whatever it was.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
Yeah, I'd say it was a long-haired story too, but anyway.
Had real hair then.
But I remember we were served a meal. This is at a different time of flying too.
Yeah, sure.
And I
had food.
And I had always felt and been encouraged by my parents through my life to be thankful. And so I bowed my head to pray just briefly, and I got this nudge from you sitting beside me, and I think your quote to me, as I recall, and I didn't pay a lot of attention to kind of start. It interrupted my interest in broccoli that I don't like anyway there. But anyway, and you said, what do you think about God?
Okay.
or something along that line. But of course, the theologian that I wasn't, the mortician that I wasn't, and things. And so, boy, I had that moment of, a little bit of mumble. But, God's very real to me. Very real to me. And I think part of it is because I know me and how ill-equipped I am in so many areas, especially on the eternal side. It's like, that's an unknown, and I need something bigger than me. But so, I'm rambling down, and I can't think of exactly, what to tell Dale here, what I think about God. It's not necessarily the Roman road of scriptures, and I can remember some of them, but it'd be helpful if I read them, or something, then depend on my memory, even as a younger person.
Right.
But I said, well, to me, God is sort of like, when I was young, I related to, I grew up in the country, and we had an outhouse. Mm-hmm. And I remember at night times, I would end up having to go out to the outhouse in the dark. And I don't know what it was, but I got scared.
Reasonable.
Yeah. I remember crawling in the dark to the outhouse so the boogeyman's wouldn't get me out there. And I don't even know they knew where we lived. But I was scared.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'd go out there with it's dark, it's fearful, and I don't know what's going to get me. And then my dad, though, was a welder and a boilermaker on the road and traveling and different things, but sometimes he'd be home. Sometimes I'd have to go to the outhouse at night, and Dad would go with me. And it was dark, and I remember I'd hold his hand and walk out to the outhouse, and I'd look at Dad and we'd talk, and I wasn't scared at all. And I said, the future, even tomorrow's, are kind of like going out in the dark. And on my own, I feel like I'd be crawling to face the future or eternity. But God to me is like holding Daddy's hand in the dark, going out to that outhouse, as I hold God's hand going into the future, into the forever. And so that was my deep theological approach of what do I think about God is like holding Daddy's hand in the dark. And for me, it was that experience of, rather than crawling in the dark, is walking with his hand in the dark to that outhouse at night. And so the future for me is the confidence, not in me, but in the hand I hold in the Lord. And I explained that in kind of a clumsy way, and then we went out and shot a commercial about Sorbothane insoles.
Yeah.
All right, in the middle of the desert, and those cozy feet
Slip
there.
them into your shoes.
Okay.
You don't need an oasis.
And so that was what we shared, but I didn't know that did anything except sort of fall on the dinner plate that day, of conversation, get off, and we got our baggage and went to work.
Mm-hmm. But it had a great impact on me, Bob.
And I didn't know that for more than a decade.
Yeah, and it took years, but it percolated, and at that moment, at that God-ordained moment when I needed him, that's what came to mind.
Really?
And as I prayed and accepted Christ alone, on my knees, in my home, this is what came to mind. Wow. The understanding that Bob gave me is to the personal relationship with Jesus, with the Lord, and really how simple it is.
Yeah.
And we tend to, and now years later, another 20 years later, I complicate things, and
we all
I
do.
get confused and whatever. But how basic and how important is all that? And,
absolutely.
And you were so instrumental, And I remember calling you up and saying, Bob, I don't know whether you remember me.
Yeah,
Because we'd lost touch, you know the way it happens. And
and it took me by surprise because it was coming from an office that I was familiar with.
Yeah, and we had talked about
ad
you.
agency.
Yeah.
Out in Phoenix, Arizona,
Phoenix,
but I didn't even know where you were at. If you were dead or alive, you know.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
So I just remember you called and you said, I don't know if you remember, but you began to share that came to mind that you took it on and said, God, if you're really there, show me. And you said you had thought about me crawling in the dark and holding Daddy's hand, then the confidence of holding Daddy's hands on my walk to the outhouse.
Yes.
Boy, when that was shared, I would have never thought that a walk to the outhouse would ever win someone to the Lord.
Oh,
I think it might be down there next to the talking donkey. You know, you know, who knows?
Balaam, are you in there?
But but you know, what is amazing is, you know, it's like, I wonder how many people right at home though have the confidence of holding someone else's hands in the dark of the future or of eternity.
Yeah, if you don't mind taking a moment, look in the lens and share the Lord and do what you did for me in whatever way He asks you to do it. To bring them to Christ, because there's nothing that we can talk about that's more important than that.
Well, and everything that I've ever done sort of, it fades, goes, and most of the people that have been big influences, I've seen them pass across that journey into eternity, and my only hope is in something that's eternal, and I found that in the Lord. And I actually, Dale, his testimony is a great inspiration to me. How could God's Holy Spirit use some kid sharing his experience of being afraid, crawling to the outhouse, to somehow give a appeal to draw them to Christ? And when I heard a decade later and then see him today in his great outreach ministry and influence of sharing Christ, it made me feel like, even now, I'm just a kid, still enjoy the coloring books more than any other part of literature, you know. But I do know, without a doubt, that my life, my hope, and my confidence in the future is not about anything I've ever done, anything I could ever do. Is I have no guarantees of anything tomorrow, and I still look to the tomorrows in a very deep darkness. But you know, when you hold the hand of the source of light, you can go with confidence. So wherever you are at home, I don't know where you are, you know, and I may or may never meet you this side of glory, but I know that if you reach out in the most simple way, you don't have to tell God anything about you. He already knows it, you know. When you start looking at how holy are you, well, it might not be that your actions are really going to give you a felony or something, but your thoughts are what God judges. And I can remember in a few times when people cut me off on the road, my road rage wasn't possibly holy, you know, in my mind. And God knows that. And I can't be in his presence. Neither can you. So it's not what we do, not even the consequences of our thoughts. It's actually what, through God's grace, what Christ did, being given to the world and giving his life to the world, laying it down willingly, even though it was through a brutal crucifixion. Christ actually experienced all of life's harms, all of life's desperateness, all of life's journey, wherever you at. It could be anything from whatever health, relationship, disappointment, joblessness, whatever it is. Jesus, he actually knows what it's like personally, but he also knows what it is to be a conqueror of all of that. And through grace, he actually gave us the opportunity to know him by just accepting it. It's like we have our ticket to paradise, but you just have to get registered in, you know? And what that means is just, you need to accept it and said, I'll take it. I trust you. You're a God of all creation, and a part of you has journeyed to the earth through the grace that is given in Christ. People have explained that the word grace is an acronym of God's riches at Christ's expense. Now, if you just said that in, that allows us to become a total son or daughter, and it puts us as an heir of the eternal kingdom of heaven, and all that God is and all that God has ever done throughout the span of eternity. But today, you have an opportunity to secure an eternal hope and cling to the eternal Father and hold His hand and not face another moment of darkness, but go in His confidence with the light to reach the shores of eternity because of what He did and forgiveness of all that you are. Please, it's not about me, it's not about that, it's what Christ did for both myself, Dale, and what He wants to have you. It's His will that none should perish, but all come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, accepting His grace for the confidence of living with Him throughout forever.
Amen.
And Dale, I hope that someone there today has made that choice, made that decision.
I hope so, yeah.
And you know, how can you encourage them? I'm sure there's some ways that they could even contact right here to you and say, yes, can you help me get some guidance? Though I know where you were on that plane. You needed a lot of guidance, young man.
I absolutely
And you
did.
certainly,
Yes, I
not
did.
only did you
Yes.
somehow reach out and get that far more than a coloring book kind of kid I was,
Yes.
finding really ways to be encouraging the
Yes.
Lord.
And the Lord has a way of reaching us at that level. And
Amen.
I encourage people to come to Christ, to know Him as your Lord and Savior, to indeed be your personal Savior. I would ask you to contact us. You can reach us on our website, of course, which is lasvegastonight.tv. We would ask you, if you would like to give us a call here at the station in Las Vegas, which is 702-480-3989. And what we want to do is work with you, talk with you, pray with you, and help you in your walk with Jesus Christ. Bob, I'm sorry, we're out of time.
Hey.
An hour has raced by.
Hey, well, I hope we haven't gotten so boring, and I've enjoyed it very
You've
much.
been
Thank you
excited.
very much, Dale.
You've been exciting.
And thank you for the inspiration that your life and testimony has been to so many, and especially me.
Thank you,
Thank
Bob.
you.
Well, God bless you, and thank you for leading me to Christ. That is the most important thing that's ever happened to me, and I have such great gratitude for that.
It's all to God's glory.
Yeah, that's it. So thanks for watching on Las Vegas Tonight. Stick around right here on this Christian television station. There's terrific programming that will inspire you, hopefully. And feel free, as I mentioned, to contact us anytime. God bless you, and as I close every show, I say, please walk with Him. God bless you.
You've been watching Las Vegas Tonight with Dale Davidson. Send your tax-deductible gifts to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. Or call 702-480-3989. Thanks for watching.